Glenn Greenwald is a award-winning journalist, and he had a live stream on this morning, and included in that live stream was something by Direct Action Everywhere. It was a protest by Direct Action Everywhere, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. What's the problem with that? But Glenn Greenwald, from what I'm gathering from his live stream, he's now vegan, but Glenn doesn't seem to understand that the problems with this kind of activism. It's very wrong-headed, and it's not really going to really benefit animals at all, or even particularly the planet. So I'm going to show you a clip, either now or at the end of this video, of what Direct Action Everywhere, which calls itself an animal rights group. It is actually anti-vegan, usually writes blogs about that are anti-vegan, and does everything it can, it would seem, to sort of downplay the importance of veganism at best. And at worst, literally kind of dumps on it. So that's Direct Action Everywhere, from what I understand, unless they've had some sort of radical change in policy since I was checking them out about a year ago. I doubt that, though, going by this protest at Smithfields. And Smithfields is a very large pig producer in the world. It's probably the largest pig producer. I'll call it pig producer, but what it is it breeds billions of pigs into existence to be tortured and killed in its large industrialized farms. Now, of course, industrialized farming is dreadful, but then we have to think about it in this way. In capitalism, businesses create the supply to meet the demand. They produce to meet the demand by the public. And we have an ever-increasing population in the world, and by 2050 it will be over 10 billion, billion with a B. At the present time, it's about 7.5 billion, I think, people on the planet. And more people in countries that were traditionally eating mostly plant-based foods are now eating animal products. That's meat, dairy, eggs, etc. And with that increase in population, that increases demand for those animal products, which means that businesses, to be economically efficient, will help meet that demand by cramming as many animals into their farms as they can, so that they can produce those animal products in an economically efficient manner and then meet the demand for those animal products. So when activists, who sometimes are not even vegan, but they call themselves animal rights activists, and there's a problem with that. It's like saying, I'm against slavery, but then owning slaves. If you're not vegan and you call yourself an animal rights activist, that completely makes no sense. So these activists involved in groups like Direct Action Everywhere, that's DxE, and also activists that are in the Extinction Rebellion, but I've done some videos about this. They don't call themselves animal rights activists, but I mean, they poo-poo veganism for similar reasons. And it's all about, in the end, it's about donations to their groups. They don't want to challenge the public, so they don't ask people to go vegan because they know that that would be a beneficial thing, the most beneficial thing you could do. They instead ask people for donations, and you'll always see a big donate button on these various activist sites. But Direct Action Everywhere doesn't seem to understand, or they disingenuously misunderstand, that when you have an ever-increasing population, the only thing that the market is going to do is try and produce those products in as economically efficient way as possible. And so there will always be industrialized farming, or what people like to call as factory farming, while the population grows and the population is not vegan. There will always be factory farming in quotes. And let's just look at factory farming, that word, for a moment. When you see industrialized farming happening with these free-range products, free-range eggs, free-range chickens, free-range turkeys, and on it goes. These are industrialized farms that have many, many animals crammed into big warehouses, and they may, if they find their way outside, which is unlikely even that most of them do, they get about an hour outside if they're lucky through some little portal in this warehouse. And most of them are crammed, and they're still suffering extreme anxiety. There's still lots of dead animals laying on the floor because they don't care if they die. It's economically efficient to raise them this way, and if some die or many die, that's okay. And when this COVID-19 pandemic happened, the way they get rid of animals that they haven't been able to bring to slaughter because of the COVID-19 pandemic and not having the ability to do that. What they do is, with Smithfields, they fill these big warehouses full of pigs that are cramped all together. They fill them full of heat and basically bake them alive. It takes hours for them to die, or suffocate them, and that takes ages to die, or both. That's what they do now to get rid of these animals, because it's economically efficient to kill them that way, because they cannot bring them to the slaughterhouses, and because they've cut down on the amount of workers in the slaughterhouses. And so they can't kill as many animals as they normally kill, which is tens of thousands. Thousands a day are killed in these slaughterhouses, many, many thousands. And the slaughterhouse lines are chaotic, and many animals are boiled alive. It's a horror house in slaughterhouses. So what I'm trying to say is, I know sometimes I get off the track here, but what I'm trying to say is that all these protests, like this one that DxE did at the Smithfields place in Virginia, I'm talking about the meeting of Smithfields employees who couldn't care less what these DxE protesters are saying. They couldn't care less. It's a business. They don't care about the animals. They don't care about the environmental costs. They don't care about any of that. So that is the wrong audience. And on top of that, there's of course no mention of veganism. And why I mention veganism, why veganism is so important, is because when you become vegan, and this means for ethical reasons, veganism is an ethical position. When you become vegan, you end your personal demand for animal products. So if you end your demand, then there's less demand, and those corporations like Smithfields, if everybody became vegan, or most people became vegan, then they would not need to supply those animal products. And Smithfields is smart enough to see that that veganism is growing, and they're starting to also expand their operations to provide plant-based products. And this is what capitalism is. It finds a niche and it exploits it. So if there are more vegans on the planet, they will meet the demand for those plant-based products. Not that we need to eat pre-made, commercially based products. They're often junk food. But I'm just saying, though, that Smithfields is already recognized as a growing number of vegans on the planet, and there's also a demand for plant-based products, and so they're broadening their market. And if eventually most people became vegan, they probably would completely abandon the whole animal raising and animal killing. Because why would they do that when there is no demand? So what I'm trying to say is, and this is something I assume that everybody who believed in animal rights, who believed that we should stop exploiting animals and killing them. I assume that even before you did anything, you would become vegan before doing any sort of activism. But apparently, people have not made that very obvious connection. Like I say, to call yourself an animal rights activist while participating in the exploitation of animals is kind of ridiculous. I'm sorry to say that. It's like when people say they're animal lovers, yet they're consuming animal products. They're selective animal lovers, in quotes. And I hate that term, animal lovers, anyway. It's kind of speciesist and patronizing. But anyway, factory farming, in quotes, because industrialized farming includes free range and enriched cages and all those animal scamming things that are just there to make more money for the industry. They charge exorbitant prices for animal products that are raised humanely, animals who are raised humanely, and there's no such thing as non-abusive use of animals, and even if there were, it would still be wrong. So Glenn Greenwald is promoting direct action everywhere, and he hasn't thought this through properly, even though he's vegan, and that's good, from what I understand from that live stream I saw. But they did this direct action everywhere, did this most ridiculous protest at Smithfields, and it was really, really, I found it embarrassing to watch. It was worse than some of the worst PETA, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, their sort of shenanigans. That is really all about, look at me, and please donate so we can continue on our work. What work? There wasn't even a mention of veganism, and what I've just explained is that we create demand for those products. Those pigs wouldn't be in those huge, awful, polluted, and torturous warehouses where they're just living this dreadful life and in confined sow stalls where they can't move or turn around. There's excrement everywhere. It reeks. The pollution all throughout the environment outside is affecting the neighborhoods. Animal agriculture in these factory farms produces, I don't know if this is just the United States, but produces 378 million tons of animal waste every year. Maybe this is only in the Smithfields, but it could be animal agriculture in the United States. That's more than 312 million people produce in a year. That's what the animal agriculture in the United States produces in 1 year. That was in 2012. You can't make this pretty. Not only is it destroying the lives of sentient animals, these pigs are leading these dreadful lives. And even if they're on mom and pop farms, they're just looked upon as products. They're just looked upon as resources. Their children are taken from them and eventually they're killed. It doesn't matter where they're exploited. The conversation needs to change from the treatment of animals to ending the use of animals. It needs to completely change, and that's what veganism is about. Veganism is an ethical position which rejects the use of animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. And that's what we need to be talking about. This is what all these organizations that are running around doing all these fancy things, throwing paint on people that are wearing fur, that are promoting all these species as things like meat-free Mondays and fish-free Fridays and Veganuary and all these different things that are all baby steps. Baby steps are for babies. We need to just understand that animal exploitation is wrong. These animals are sentient animals that deserve the right not to be used as a thing, as property. And the way to end it is to promote vegan education. This is what Direct Action Everywhere should be doing, except they're actually anti-vegan. And instead they're doing these ridiculous protests at Smithfields at a business where that's like going to Lockheed Martin and talking about anti-war. They're not even talking about the animal ethics. The Direct Action Everywhere goes to Smithfields. They're not even talking about the ethical reasons to stop doing these things. They were talking about animal excrement. That's what they went there to Smithfields, like as if those people don't know that. But this is, it's similar to going to a weapons manufacturer and sort of talking to them about, the pollution from dropping bombs. That's how unfortunate that protest is by Direct Action Everywhere. I mean, it's like when I talk about anti-imperialism and anti-war on this channel, we're responsible in the end for these bombs being dropped on black and brown people overseas. If we're not anti-war and anti-imperialist, and we're not pushing against it and trying to educate the public to reject it, then those wars will continue. It's about us. It's not about these weapons manufacturers or Smithfields or McDonald's or any of these animal businesses. They're just businesses. They're just meeting demand for animal products, and they wouldn't be there if you and I were vegan. These animals wouldn't be being tortured and killed in slaughterhouses or tortured and killed in mom and pop farms. They wouldn't be in any of these places if we were vegan, if we weren't creating the demand for these businesses to be selling these products or to be producing these animals and breeding them into existence by literally the hundreds of billions every year. And the same with destroying the oceans due to our non-veganism. There wouldn't be these gigantic trawlers in the oceans taking everything with them as they go, including all the other animals we fetishize, like dolphins and whales, etc., by the hundreds of thousands. This wouldn't be happening either if we were vegan. And something that I haven't mentioned in this is that animal agriculture is one of the main drivers of the climate crisis. And look at the meme that I regularly post, the largest study to date, 114 countries, 40,000 farms from farm to fork. They did all this research and discovered that a plant-based diet a diet free of eggs, dairy, and meat is the single most important action one can take to address the climate crisis. So if we claim that we're environmentalists and we're not vegan, we need to reassess. I hope that I've made this clear. When I see these protests by Direct Action Everywhere and the like, any of these large animal groups, and that's why I never endorse large animal organizations, any animal organization that doesn't have veganism as their central thing, and that they're not promoting this idea that there's such a thing as humane use of animals, that it's morally justifiable to use animals humanely, There is no such thing as non-abusive use of animals. No such thing. And even if there were, it would still be wrong. And we don't need these animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason all of this insane and horrific stuff is going on towards non-human animals is because we think they taste good. And that's morally wrong to be participating in it. So I wish that Glenn Greenwald would realize this, that it's all about supply and demand in the end. Very basically, it's about supply and demand, and for these and he should just abandon direct action everywhere and just start talking about veganism, because he's obviously very committed to it, and he feels it's very important, and it is very important. And it should tell him something about direct action everywhere, that they poo-poo veganism. They write blogs about dumping on veganism. It should tell him something, and he should just abandon them and do his own vegan education and stop focusing on treatment of animals, because there's never ever going to be a morally acceptable way to exploit animals. Never. And the only way we're ever going to end all this industrialized farming and all the awful things that go on in that, and that includes the free range and the enriched cages and all that nonsense, and the humane animal products, all that nonsense. The only way it's ever going to end is when we end our demand for animal products, meat, dairy, eggs, etc., and end our demand for animal use in general, for entertainment, and all of those different excuses we use to use animals. The only way it's going to end is when you and I go vegan and recognize that animals belong in our community, our moral community, and we have no rights to exploit and kill them at all. Anyway, I hope I've explained this okay. It's just, I just kind of go a little bit, it just makes me spare when I see this focus on factory farming, when I know it's never going to end until most of us are vegan. Never going to end. And it really annoys me when I see still at this late stage animal groups and people who call themselves animal activists pushing for this kind of nonsense. I mean, all they have to do is think it through to see that this is a wrong-headed approach to the whole thing. But in the end, these animal groups are also businesses, because they ask for donations and they pay people. They have to pay themselves if they want to do these costly little silly protests at businesses, and shouting at direct action everywhere goes into restaurants and shouts at people. That's not going to work. You might be lucky, it might work on someone, but most of the time people just think it's really annoying because they've gone there to have a dinner, and here are these activists just shouting at them and shaming them. And of course, not one mention of veganism either. And one more thing I wanted to say. What do these people want to happen if they got their wish and factory farming came to an end? What do they want people to do then? Buy products from small little animal farms where they kill animals like that? I mean, that's the other thing that's never ever addressed. That's why it's so stupid. Because it's never going to happen. These small farms are never ever going to be able to address the demand for animal products. That's why factory farming exists, industrialized farming. So ask these people when they go on about factory farms, what's their plan if factory farming came to an end, which is never going to happen. What's their plan? I bet you they don't have one. It's all about veganism. Just abandon these animal groups, all of them, and just go vegan and encourage others to do the same. Check out my vegan resource, howtogovegan.org. Thanks for watching. Till next time. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Thanks Signals from Vega. Bye for now.